thank you all for coming to this session. My name is Linda Kruger, and I'm a social scientist with the Forest Service, with the Pacific Northwest Research Station. And so our office is out by the university. I've lived in Southeast Alaska off and on for a while up in Haines, and did work with the Haines and Klukwan people back in the 70s. And in 83, I moved here to Juneau and lived here until 89, and then I moved to Seattle to go to the University of Washington. And while I was there, I learned all about research and how to work with people. And what I learned was working with people, going into a community and working and talking with people and engaging the people in the community in the questions that you ask, in conducting the research, in looking at what you learn. And so all of my research right from the start has been very community-based and involving community people. And here in Southeast Alaska, as Tom Thornton just discussed, is going in and saying, this is what we're interested in, what are you interested in, can we work together, can we have permission to come into your place and learn about things with you. And so that's the way we've been doing work. And so in addition to that, the other thing I've been really interested in is climate change and how the environment is changing around us. And native and traditional people around the world are acknowledging, observing, experiencing change firsthand. More so than people that live in cities and urban areas and aren't in touch with their natural environment. And so it's really, really important for me to understand better what kinds of changes Native people are experiencing and observing, how those changes relate to the stories that have been handed down from ancestors, and how things are different now from what they were years ago, but then also to take that information and merge it with what the scientists tell us is happening and what the scientists tell us to anticipate will happen in the future, and to put that together. And then also to understand adaptation strategies. We know change is happening. What are some kinds of things that we can do to prepare to be adaptive as that change happens? And so we initiated a couple of different studies that we're going to talk about today, looking at what communities in Southeast Alaska and people in Southeast Alaska are observing and experiencing as far as their changing environment and what they've noticed, and documenting that with them. And the first study we did was with Jim Powell, who's an assistant professor at the University of Alaska Southeast here in Juneau. At the time we initiated this study, he was working with the University of Alaska in Fairbanks. So there was input into this work both from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, which is involved in a broader study that involves more areas than Southeast Alaska, and then the work with me, with the Forest Service, which primarily focused in Southeast Alaska. And so the first thing I'm going to do is hand it over to Jim to describe the study that we did initially, Conversations in Environmental Change in Southeast Alaska. And he'll talk about the different communities that we worked with and what we learned. Jim?
Thank you, Linda, and thanks for coming. I guess I have a couple stories for you today, and I'm going to talk a little bit. I'm going to let the video do the talking, which is basically locals talking about what they're seeing, their observations of environmental changes. We use the word environmental changes because we don't necessarily attribute those to climate change. Most of the ones you see out here are, but we didn't make that distinction, so we say environmental changes. It's interesting, Linda's really wonderful introduction, and it made me think of, we are doing research in 3 parts of the state, similar research in that we're asking locals as well as, you might say, experts, or the scientists, the resource managers, what they're seeing, what are their, we call them perceptions. So when we went to Kenai, short story within this bigger story, I went down there and we have ecologists, biologists, we're looking at the Kenai River, and there's changes. So we go in and we ask the experts, okay, we have these scientists that are working with the local scientists, and they just go in and they start studying. And I thought, you know, when we go into local communities, we ask for permission. And so we went to Kenai. We didn't go to the local assembly or to the Knights tribe. And I thought, the work here was teaching me we didn't really ask for permission from the local assembly, the elected leaders. And I said, come on guys, we gotta go into the assembly. If I used to be on the assembly here, I'd like to know that you guys are studying stuff in my backyard. So anyway, you guys, it made me think, and I got them to do that, and we went to these committees and we said, hey, we're doing this stuff. And they were interested. So anyway, I just thought I thought of that story that, you know, we don't, as a procedure now, we ask for permission. When I went to Cancun, when I went to Yakutat, we went to the traditional councils and we asked for permissions. But as we didn't do it in our own culture, to walk into the assembly members and say, hey, we're in your backyard doing this research. Anyway, so you're teaching us the proper way of doing research. And I thought that was interesting. So the story that I have here is, I'm not going to talk too much about the story. I have a few slides, and we're going to go into a video. It's 9 minutes long, and I'd rather have the video itself do the talking. But I should talk a little about how it was put together. And that is, as Linda said, we're studying what people are seeing, because there is a value to local and traditional knowledge. And how does that work? How does that compare with what the scientists are measuring, or what we're calling instrument measures? So you have perception or observations and instrument measures. Because we believe if there's a difference, we're in trouble. Because maybe at least that we should acknowledge that and know that. So if we're seeing, if everybody in the local community is saying, hey, the salmon are going down, but the instrument readings when we go in for a couple weeks to look at salmon, and they're telling us something different, maybe we can learn from each other. It's different using all the knowledge we can, local, traditional, and we call it instrument measure knowledge. And that's what we did in Southeast. So I went to Yakutat and got permission from the traditional council there, Cancun, and then 4 communities on Prince of Wales.
Jim,
So
could you just put a time frame on that?
Oh, when was it done?
When it was done, yeah.
Yeah, the last couple of years. Yeah, the last couple of years. When did we start? Yeah, it was the last couple of years. It's like 3, I think it was like 3 field seasons.
Yeah.
But we went back and forth 2 to 4 times, 4 or 5 times maybe to the communities. And yeah, anyway, so that's who I am. I work out at, I'm a, what's called a social ecological systems scientist. Ugh. But I do a lot in both worlds, social stuff and also ecological things. So I'd like to give special thanks. It's always neat when somebody comes to you and goes, hey, you want to do this stuff? And you're really interested in it. Well, that's what Linda did for me anyway. I got a PhD, retired from the state, and I said, hey, you want to do this work? I said, I'd love to. So I did this thing called, it's a postdoctorate study with Fairbanks, and so we started this study. So Linda, special thanks to Linda, because she's been a mentor too, because she's been out there doing this stuff a lot longer than I have. And then Scott Rupp from Fairbanks, and then thank you to the participants in this video too, and all the people that gave me permission to go in. So that would be the community participants, and then tribal thanks to those tribes that said, yes, you can come in and work in our community. Very important. Well, remember I was talking about this thing, perceptions or observations and instrument measures. I was interested to see if there was a difference of what people were saying was changing and what the instruments, the scientists were, Western scientists were seeing. Well, actually, yes. This is a very rough slide. I have a better slide coming up. But basically in these categories, you know, is the abundance of salmon, is it going up or down or changing? People said across, they said, it's kind of going down. And the instruments were saying that too. Herring, going down. Now, there's time frames. This is very coarse in its estimate. Because as you know, herring used to be very plentiful, and then we've gone down, and maybe we're coming back, not sure. But this tells you, yes, they're similar, yes, yes, whale population is going up, as we know it is. So the observations were consistent. The take home is the observations are very similar to what science is telling us. However, there's different detail that you get. There's a lot of detail, conceptual context, local detail that you get when we do our work that you don't get from just measuring one species at a certain 2-week time in the environment. So you can see we looked at sea otters, yes, 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 yes. They're all similar. Seals, fewer bees, deer population. These are the kind of things we looked at. Weather was very unpredictable. One common thing we heard was, God, we used to be able to read the weather. Now we can't. It's too unpredictable. We used to say, hey, the clouds look this way or that way, and I knew that if I went in my boat, I could go out and it's reliable. Now it's not reliable. So that has some implications to it. Colder springs, that was kind of mixed data on that. That was really hard to tell. Less snow covered, no more ice in bays. That was really interesting in Thorn Bay. That place they used to use the bay for transportation. Haven't done that in quite a while. Winter's not as harsh. Okay, now we're getting a little bit more sophisticated with the graphs. This is southeast temperature perception. Perception over here, most people said the temperature is increasing. This is some of the instrument data on this side. So we're comparing science with perceptions, a little bit more finer tuned. And then, we love to have graphs and stuff like that. So anyway, and it's nice to have. You can see as far as the king salmon abundance, this was taken actually by another group that we've interviewed, and that was the managers. Was their perception of what's going on, the managers in town. We did 25 interviews of those that should be or could be closer to the resources because they manage them. Were they perceived to see? And it was really neat to interview them because when you go into a fish and game area and you go, okay, what's your perception of the number of kings coming in? And they'll go, where was the last data sheet I saw? I can't answer that. I can't give you my perception because I've been trained not to give you my perception. I've been trained to look at data sheets. Don't ask me, I can't compute. They were kind of like, their head was going back and forth. I said, don't worry about it. Just try to think about your observations. That's a paper in itself, I think, trying to get somebody to get outside of their sheet, their box that they've been trained to not answer a question unless they got the data, the footnote. So that was kind of a experience in itself. But anyway, and that's actually, I put this in here, this is South Central king abundance. We're doing studies on the Kenai about perceptions of change, right? So anyway, I put that in there just to show you that we're trying to tease this stuff out. Here's the southeast. And so you can see these are perceptions, and there's kind of 3 graphs. We ask, is it increasing? Is it decreasing? I don't know. And most of it was decreasing, as you can see. And then this is a graph of the science that looks like it's decreasing. At least that's what the science said. Southeast temperature perception, there we go. Okay, so that's kind of like a summary, a quick, I'd rather have you see the film. So I'm gonna play the film, hopefully this will work and the audio's set up, and I'm just gonna get into it. Let the locals speak for themselves.
Is it coming out of the?
Yeah, I know, I'm trying to get the speaker going.
Okay.
Changes communities in Southeast Alaska are experiencing, how residents are already adapting to
I'll move it
change,
back.
and where they think their communities will be in the future. With permission from local tribal councils, the University of Alaska Fairbanks was contracted to research local perceptions of environmental change. UAF researchers and 4 service scientists met with local community experts and elders
So while Jim's working on that, I'll just mention, he mentioned being a social ecologist, and that's one of the things that traditional people have never, I don't think, ever tried to separate the social and the people side from the environment. Why would you do such a thing? You know, they're so intertwined and linked, and actually one system. Well, Western society, Western science split them apart and said, this is people over here, and this is the environment over here. One of the things that we're trying to do with these studies is bring them back together and say this is a social ecological system. The people and the environment are together, and let's look at the intersection, the interaction, and how they work together. So that's another reason that this study is so great for me, and I get so excited about it, is because it's an opportunity to bring together the people and the environment, and look what's happening with them joined together.
I think we got it.
You got it? Great.
Technology. Sorry. Sorry, guys. I had it working this morning. I tried new technology and yeah, get the technical experts.
Well, they're working on that. Does anybody have any questions so far? Maybe I can answer some questions about the study. I don't know. Before we go, yeah.
It's not about this.
Oh, is that about the study?
Oh, I just had a question on, those of us who are berry pickers.
Yeah.
The big change in, the big gaps of, you know, there's no berries to pick.
Berries, yeah.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot about berries, and in fact, I just downloaded a study yesterday that was done, not here in Southeast Alaska, it was done in the interior about berries.
Yeah.
And so berries are one that, like I say, I'm not sure if anyone is looking so much in Southeast, but in the rest of the state, they're having really low berry crops. So the berries are really being affected by the change, by the climatic changes. Yeah.
Well, I just wondered to what extent, I was just talking with, I forgot your first name, Eric, about planning, because Forest Service does planning.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been studying indigenous knowledge and learning a lot about how indigenous people make decisions. And I wondered to what extent values, you know, how is what we're doing now going to turn out to be the best for all?
Mm-hmm.
To what extent in your work did you really incorporate values of how is what we're doing now going to be the best for everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is how Native people think about what they do.
Right. And I guess we haven't looked at that. We haven't looked at how is management affecting this, or how could this be input into management. We're just specifically looking at native uses, how they're using it, and the effects of change, whether it's climate change, it might be cruise ships, and it might be pollution, it might be over-harvesting. What are all those kinds of things, and what are the implications of that? So we haven't gone that next step as far as introducing it into management decisions. Yeah, are you ready?
Here we
Did you
go.
get it going?
We hardly get snow
There we
and
go.
it hardly sticks.
So the weather patterns are going to change.
Well, I never saw my elders talk about climate change,
Yeah.
but we definitely lived it.
Is that good for everybody? Can you hear it in the back?
A little bit higher.
A little louder?
Climate change is often studied by scientists,
I think that's good.
measured with graphs and data linked to predictions of what might happen in the future. But what about the changes in the environment that local people are observing now? The U.S. Forest Service wanted to know what changes communities in Southeast Alaska are experiencing, how residents are already adapting to change, and where they think their communities will be in the future. With permission from local tribal councils, the University of Alaska Fairbanks was contracted to research local perceptions of environmental change. UAF researchers and a Forest Service scientist met with local community experts and elders. Residents in Yakutat, Angoon, and 4 communities on the Prince of Wales Island Thornbay, Kassan, Craig, and Clark were interviewed. Several patterns emerged after talking with over 90 local residents, including changes in fish runs and animal populations, plants, and weather.
Oh man, there's been terrible change in the amount of fish that come in, or even the amount of herring.
Nobody's ever seen 3 weeks early sockeye, 3 weeks late call. Nobody's ever seen that before, and all of a sudden it's happening.
When originally, growing up, I remember seeing so much fish in the stream, it was amazing. You wonder what that does because, you know, I've taken health class and every fish that dies has a purpose to that stream. When you have less fish spawning and dying in that stream, it's gotta have an impact.
You mean the sun?
Yeah, the temperatures. Last June was brutal. We had huge amphibian die-offs. None of the spruce grouse decimated.
There were numerous frogs. Probably from the late 70s, early 80s is when the frogs, the population started dwindling. And today you don't see one frog.
When I was growing up, I used to hunt with my dad. We'd see like 50 deer in one spot. And then there was so much deer, and we'd have these hard winters, and I don't seem to see that anymore. Big snowfalls, big deer kills. In a way that was bad for the deer, but it was also good for the deer.
Probably the last 10 years, it started getting warmer this year. It's really noticeable.
The duration of the fall storms are lasting a lot longer, and they're more frequent.
I used to be able to, when I first started weaving, go out on almost just about a set date and gather cedar bark from the trees. Sometimes we get a little heat spell in there that's pretty intense in the spring, and sometimes the cold lingers. And so it's thrown off my gathering time to the point where I have to go out every weekend.
What's been observed locally, like unpredictable weather, intensified storms and loss of frogs, correlates with measured science.
We don't hunt for fun, it's for, you know, there's a reason we do everything we do.
All the families still do the same. In fact, it's probably more strength than anything because people, you know, tried to preserve it and went and brought things back that, you know, were getting lost.
Some families had strengths in harvesting one thing, and others had strengths in harvesting another. And, you know, those strengths we utilize, you know, not only to save, you know, money, you know, but it saves time and it also saves lives. You know, because you're not subjugating yourself to being out in that harsh, inclement weather, you know, where one person can go out and do a lot of harvesting and then bring it in, get it prepared, now it's ready for barter and or distribution.
We worry about our native foods adjusting to the climates.
The recent studying and understanding of what's happening to the acidification of the ocean and how that's going to affect salmon populations or shellfish populations. Will they be able to adapt?
Yakutat, this is our community. These are sites here that are of concern, contaminated sites that we're cleaning up. And what I notice that's going on, the water is rushing in and eating away the hillsides. So a lot of the equipment from the war is being dropped into the ocean.
Working with Kathy, doing a lot of our marine debris work, you know, cleanup work, I've really kind of been noticing coastal kind of shoreline, the banks there are just really being eroded.
How will communities in Southeast Alaska adapt to change? The answers reflect optimism, a readiness to access tools and resources, and use local and traditional knowledge to continue and to thrive.
I think actually this room we're standing in and these things that we're doing here are part of that adaptation. Building these canoes, building totem poles, building this old longhouse. The kids are a big part of this process, and one of the very important, maybe most important reason for doing all this. And it gives them a sense of identity.
We've learned to adapt and figure out a new way. Like now, things are so tough here. We're back to the old ways where neighbors help neighbors, and there's no time to argue because we're all trying to survive out here. Which I think is a good thing. It brings us all closer as a community.
I think when you look at our youth, they're going out and they're gone for a little while, but they always have that need to return back home.
Every place needs to have more control of its own area, and we need to get to a point where a long time ago when we had, people had gardens. This way you see the community garden in the middle of the village here. It's one of those steps. They're all small steps. They have to catch on. People have to become interested.
In the future, people will be more reliant on the food that we get.
The ability of the Yakutat to adapt to this is, one, the landscape's always been changing and people have adapted to it. Two, there's a lot of resources that are going to come online as other resources come offline. Lakes and streams are going to get better as others get poorer. We're right in the middle of the greatest protected ecosystem complex in North America.
I see the community as a whole becoming more and more aware of it. There's more talk about it. People who 10 years ago might have been skeptical, very skeptical, are now actively seeking information on what's going on. That's a very positive thing.
Our generators, diesel generators, are emitting and putting out into the atmosphere. And how do we change it? We change it by renewable energy. Wind, solar, wave action.
We're creating some environmental issues ourselves, and we have to be more responsible to ourselves and our community and the world. I'm hoping that in 50 years that we can be self-sufficient. I'm hoping that we're all burning less fossil fuels, and I'm hoping we're recycling our garbage and just be more responsible for our waste.
One person that I didn't mention I should really thank is Ellen Frankenstein. She edited this, which was an incredible, it's like doing a thesis in itself. These are all the people that helped, that were interviewed, voices. There we go.
So I know Elaine had a question, and then you have a question? Okay, Elaine?